A quick check before we begin the session. And
Yes, that is, this is Yousif's screen, or it will be shortly.
absolutely, yes, ma'am. So, do you have anything to screen so that we have to present or anything? The poems have been circulated.
Oh, right. So you're not screen sharing the poems?
No, we are not screen sharing the poems. We have circulated the poems as Google Drive link to everyone of the audience.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Right now, you will be. I'm sorry, you will not be able to see me. You will be able to see an empty conference hall. Everybody will be joining with us shortly. We have been running a little behind schedule.
Okay.
So our chair is also coming. He's here actually. So
Right.
yes. So
It's lovely.
yes.
Lovely to see you, Shash.
Hi, Eleanor. You all right?
Good, thank you. And Yousif is here as well, so I'll pass over to him.
Hi, Yousif.
Yeah.
Hi, lovely to see you, Shash.
You
And
too, Yousif. Are you okay?
yeah, I'm okay. I'm rather exhausted, but lovely to see you.
Oh,
And
Hello, Professor Yousif.
it's Yousif, please. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Yousif.
this is like a dry run for our stint at Ledbury, Yousif.
Yes, absolutely. And I very much look forward to seeing you in person then.
Yes, it'd be lovely, won't it, after?
Absolutely.
Lovely
And
seeing
Will
you.
is lovely as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We'll be starting very shortly. So please bear with us a little bit while all the logistics take place. Thank you.
Lovely to see you, Anthony.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi, thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here.
It's wonderful to see you.
I'm in Trinidad and getting my mind around the 9.5 hours. I keep on thinking it's 9 hours or 10 hours time difference, but of course it is 9.5.
It's when the clocks turn back or go forward or whatever they do, that completely confuses me.
For me, it's anything that's a fraction.
Yeah. Be half an hour.
Yes.
Hello, Yousif. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, hello, Yousif, Shash, and Anthony. Very nice to have you all here. Great to see you, and I hope you'll have an enlightening session now. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to put my poems on the screen. Can you check whether you could still see me when I do that? Because
I don't know how to do that in this app.
well, if I'm not sharing it, but I'm just putting it on my screen while I read, and I'm frightened that I'm going to disappear, and all you're going to see is my document. So
I would be much happier if people just saw my document instead of me giving this is my 6:30 in the morning face.
Yeah.
so like, but can you still see me now?
Yes,
Yes, we
very
can.
beautifully so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's lovely.
And can you still see your poems?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We can share your poems on the screen if you would like to have them there.
Yeah, sure, that'd be lovely. I sent it earlier. Is that
Yes, I have received them. So we'll try to share your poems on the screen so that the others can also have a look at them.
oh
But
brilliant?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I missed that part.
that's okay,
So,
Yusuf. I'm
thank
glad
you.
you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll start the session in 2 more minutes.
Hello. Can you see the poems on the screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we are proceeding to the fourth session of the day. This is going to be a hybrid session, which is dedicated to poetry reading, where we hope to explore themes of displacement, identity, and resilience. Today, we are honored to have with us three eminent poets, Yousif M. Qasmiyeh from University of Oxford, Shash Trevett from poet and translator, and Anthony Vahni Capildeo, writer in residence, University of York. Their poetic voices cover the complexities of loss, longing, and belonging. When it comes to experiences of displacement, because of the weightage of testimonial value that it carries, it is imperative that we find a form that doesn't close off the experience of trauma or emotions attached with it. At the same time, it should also reveal tentative truths about these experiences. So, poetry has always been contested as a form which can adequately respond to situations and events of trauma. This has been debated since the time of Holocaust, where people were experiencing trauma and they were trying to put it across to the world through the medium of poetry. So, today, chairing this session is Dr. Saradindu Bhattacharya. He's from the Department of English, University of Hyderabad. He enjoys teaching, reading, and teaching poetry, obviously. He also runs the poetry reading sessions in the Department of English. I would like to invite Dr. Sharadindu Bhattacharya to the stage so that he can take over the session. I also welcome Professor Yousif M. Qasmiyeh, Shash Trevett, and Anthony Vahni Capildeo. Also, all the viewers who have joined us via the YouTube link. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to invite all of you, especially our eminent speakers now, to this session of the conference. I'll quickly introduce the speakers to you guys before we listen to their poetry. Shash Trevett is a poet, critic, and translator of Tamil poetry into English. Born in Sri Lanka, she now lives in the UK. Her poetry has been widely published in journals and anthologies. She has read variously across the UK and internationally, and is a winner of a Northern Writers Award. Out of Sri Lanka, Tamil, Sinhala, and English poetry from Sri Lanka and its diasporas. Published by Blood Axe and Penguin India in 2023, which she co-edited with Vidyan Ravindiran and Seni Senaviratne, was at Times Literary Supplement's Books of the Year for 2023. The Naming of Names, her full collection, was published by Smith Doorstep in 2024, and her work has recently been conserved by the Poetry Archive. Shash has presented at academic conferences both in the UK and abroad, and has been involved with the Singapore Translation Symposium, the Pen Translates Awards, and the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. She's a member of the Kinara Poetry Collective, is a Ledbury critic, and a board member of Modern Poetry in Translation. Born and educated in Badawi refugee camp in Lebanon, Yousif M. Qasmiyeh is a poet and scholar who completed his doctorate in English literature at the University of Oxford. Time, the Body, and Ruination inform his poetry and prose, which have appeared in Modern Poetry in Translation, Critical Quarterly, Cambridge Literary Review, Poetry Nation Review, Stand, New England Review, Poetry London, and Vasafiri. Yousif is the Creative Encounters editor of the Migration and Society Journal and writer in residence for the Refugee Hosts Project. His debut collection, Writing the Camp, published by Broken Sleep Books 2021, was a PBS recommendation, was selected as one of the best poetry books of 2021 by The Telegraph and The Irish Times, was highly recommended by the 2021 Forward Prizes for Poetry, and was shortlisted for the 2022 Royal Society of Literature Ondarche Prize. Yousif's latest books are Eating the Archive and with Fidan Qasmiyeh and Saiful Haq Omi, Southern Eye 2024. Anthony Vahni is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and is a Trinidadian Scottish writer of poetry and non-fiction. Recent poetry publications are Polka Dot Wounds, published in 2024 by Carsonet, and A Happiness. Their writing has been recognized with honors such as the Wyndham Campbell Prize, the Ocean Bocas Prize for Poetry in the Caribbean Diaspora section, the Colmondelli Award, Society for Authors UK, and the Forward Poetry Prize, Best Collection. Capildeo has served as a judge for numerous awards, including the Jhalak Prize, and as the first guest curator of the Royal Society of Literature Review 2025. As an online poet in residence, they contributed pandemic dispatches to the Poetry on the Move Festival in Canberra 2020. Capildeo enjoys interdisciplinary and collaborative work, for example, creating a word fishing installation with artist Molly Fairhurst for the Henry Moore Institute Leeds, and conserving with Yousif M. and Maya Kasperi for Wasafiri, Volume 119 Futurisms in 2024. Their research interests extend to traditional masquerade, memory, place, and plurilingualism. Capildeo is a practicing Roman Catholic and also organizes with Fossil Free Books. They are currently professor at the University of York and an honorary student of Christ Church, Oxford. An essay collection drawn from over 10 years of contributions to PN Review will appear from Carsonet Press in 2026. So with this brief introduction to the poets, I welcome you all to the session. Over to you.
I think, Anthony, you should go first.
I love being the warm-up act for the two of you, because then I can sit back and enjoy and learn. I sent some poems through in a file, but first I would like to thank everyone for the honor of this invitation and for making the time to be here. And I will try to attend more of the conference. I'm on a 9.5-hour time difference, and also looking after an elderly relative, which is why I haven't been here before, but I promise to correct that, as there is much to talk about and connect over. If anybody would want to share the screen who has got the poems, because I don't feel confident to share the screen myself, I would be grateful, but if not, I will begin reading. Thank you. I won't read all the poems because it's too many. Soundscape with blood circulation and inaudible sparring. The healer, driving the needles in, relaxing me with stories of the biggest fighting men, how they lie there giggling, clunk, clunk. I hear the inside of my ear, a mixed border of delphiniums, asters, and non-alphanumeric symbols, breezes insistently and stop, flow, unbottles my eyes. Every blockage a flower, a black river fiery with ceremonial flowers. They call it coming to, but I'm not there yet, while he holds my hand in his killer's paw that chose the healer's way, at the point where mastery splits the paths of training, holding my hand, telling me perhaps about a creature, something running outdoors, because I've been passing out in the acupuncture room, windowless and insulated from the sound of men and women, many men and women, fighting. If that is it, that is what he brings me back to. Is that what he brings me back for? The next poem, we should really take a little opinion poll. I don't know whether to say cicada or cicada. Meanwhile, cicadas. If we take all the fish out the lake once a year, if we check for native fish against invasive fish, if we put invasive fish in special boxes, put native fish back in the lake, if we take good care, use pure detergents, soap-free soap, perhaps the lake will, from its dark, rough, clear north to its green, choppy south, be good to us, livable, never gentle, never yet measured, not cause drowning, drought, not be cross or crossed. This is about a real lake in Japan, which apparently is inhabited by a water dragon, and this happens every year. Okay. The next poem, prose poem, Steal This. It's about a small Harappa object that I saw in a museum in another city in India. Steal this. My tiny hippopotamus, bandog, or lost species was not mislabeled as a ritual object. Unlike the broken combs, cosmetic jars, and other inexplicable mystery discards tweezed from their floodplain or festival-skirted magma tombs. It was labeled as a toy. But for 4,000 years, nobody has played with it. And when the woman knocked at your side door in the house with no front door, you skinned her with one glance and saw you were one blood, you and she. But her people earliest had left the floodplain and the festival-skirted magma tombs where yours wintered and mantraed, deserting much longer after every each day and after the day tomorrow. That is how it is counted. I am 6 years old, plus 4,500 years. When she quickly changed the price of her cloth wares and refused to cross your threshold, there were no more toys, only glass. Glass for a few thousand years. Your notes danced in her hand, and she despised you in her heart. But my ready orange toy, which has a happy face, is looking up. I don't mind if you break it. Don't worry about anything. Don't worry. Let's play. Without armor, a race is happening across the field. Its course involves caravans, horses, 3 king-queens, real camels, linen, and bleached canvas. Did I come out without my armor? A race is happening. Someone in white, attached by his heels, dragged by a chariot, half on the ground, body and robes pulled along, looks full face towards us. He is laughing. Is this violence and part of the race? Winner in white, in the thick of the crowd, he laughs as if dragged and winning. He is on his feet, an El Greco crescent, down again, an El Bosco fluorescent. What is this race? Small amounts of time enter everywhere. Small amounts of time everywhere. Rosewood answers. I'm not reading the next one, it's too long, but feel free to circulate it after. Do really whatever you like with these texts after. So the next one is From Measures of Expatriation, another prose poem. Going nowhere, getting somewhere. How was it that till questioned, till displaced in the attempt to answer, I had scarcely thought of myself as having a country, or indeed as having left a country? The answer lies peripherally in looming, in hinterland, primarily in the tongueless, palpitating interiority. Trinidad was, Trinidad is. In the same way, some confident speakers do not think of themselves as having an accent. They will say so. I don't have an accent. You have an accent. In those accentless voices, compass points spin, ochre and ultramarine flagella fling themselves identifiably towards this, that, or the other region. It is a motile version of that luxury, solidity, non-reflectivity that is the assumption of patria. So different is the expat from the refugee, who has her country on her back, or the migrant who has countries at his back. What would I have called home before I began creating home, before I had to learn to ravel up longitude, latitude, population, oil rigs, mobile phone masts, prayer flags, legality of fireworks, likely use of firearms, density and disappearance of forests, scarlet ibis, other stripes of scarlet, into a, by listeners unvisited, communicable, substantial image of Trinidad. Language is my home. It is alive other than in speech. It is beyond a thing to be carried with me. It is ineluctable, variegated, and muscular. A flicker and drag emanates from the idea of it. Language seems capable of girding the oceanic earth, like the world serpent of Norse legend. It is as if language places a shaping pressure upon our territories of habitation and voyage, thrashing, independent, threatening to rive our known world apart. Yet thought is not bounded by language. At least, my experience of thinking does not appear so bound. One day I lost the words wall and floor. There seemed no reason to conceive of a division. The skirting board suddenly reduced itself to a nervous gentrification, a cover-up of some kind, nothing especially marked. The room was an inward-focused container. Wall, floor, even ceiling, doorway, shutters started to flow smoothly, like a red-ribbed tank top over a heaving ribcage. Room grew into quarter, room became segment, line yearned till it popped into curve. The imperfections of what had been built or installed, the ragged window frame or peeling tile, had no power to reclaim human attention, to floor or wall as such. Objects were tethered like astronauts, and a timid fringe of disarrayed atmosphere was the immediate past that human activity kept restyling into present. The interiority of the room was in continuous flow. Wall, floor became usable words again in a sort of silence. I had the sense to shut up about the languageless perception. Procedure for living. Language is my home, I say, not one particular language. And for my last poem, I'm going to read the second section of Odyssey Response, which obviously is a response to the ancient Greek epic, the Odyssey, which other Caribbean writers have engaged with. So again, feel free, please, to circulate the whole text if anybody wants to see it afterwards. But I'm just reading the second section. Hero. Tell me how to simplify a song. Tell me about identity, fidelity, solve the problem of a face. Tell me about a state governed by emotion. Would you move? Choose to move? If they force you into moving, if you cannot afford not to, make a song about one person who can cope. Is it a hero you want? Why not say so? I am suspicious of heroes. How do they survive? I know a mother who scattered her children on the way out of war and has not gone back to look. What if the hero, shining like a falcon, arrives, having traded their body for life, trailing killings and transactional sex? Is the hero empowered to treat their spouse to raw cuts of trauma, treat them worse and better than anyone else? Help can be a trap. Home, a mating of traps. Who do you want at your back? Enough. I am privileged to have civil conversations in a corrected city, commemorate the correct dead. How changeable is a hero, like modern rainfall patterns. How fearful is a hero, patched like an archaic sail. How lifted up is a hero, like the great-grandchild of immigrants, hurting his parents, hoping his child is kind. Witness those ghosts who, after a natural disaster, don't know they're dead. Poor wet ghosts, trying to board rail taxis home. Thank you, and I will leave it to Shash and Yousif to toss a coin and decide who goes next.
I
Thank you
think
so
that
much.
Shash should. Thank you very much, Anthony. Shash, please.
Right. Thanks, Yousif. Thank you, Anthony. That's amazing. It's always amazing to hear you read your work. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Dr. Telugu and Dr. Mukherjee and Eleanor Fiddy and Qasmiyeh for inviting me to read alongside these two behemoths of poetry. It's such a pleasure and a real honour. So I'm going to read a selection of poems from my book, The Naming of Names, which was came out last year with the poetry business Smith's Doorstop, which is about the names of civilians killed during the war in Sri Lanka. But first, I'm going to read a poem from the book, which I haven't actually sent out, which I'm only doing because it's a real treat for me to read to audiences from the East who actually get the language and the names and what I'm talking about, as opposed to audiences in the UK to whom Tamil is just a weird language. So this is just for me. It's not about migration, but it's about names. These were their names. What does it feel like to sound these half-used names of half-lived lives? Arulam Palam, a golden blessing. Arul Muganathan, a man with a wondrous face. Arunachalam, a hill of intense fire. Ashokan was to live a life without sorrow. Bhavani was to be a giver of life. Gita carried the music of the gods in her hair, and so did Ragini. Yasoda was a gift from God. Kavita, a poem. Piriyalini was a woman in love. Nesadurai, a man filled with love. Chini Thambi was a little boy made of sugar. Sivaratnam, a child of light. So many names, bound by 1,000 blessings. So many names turned to dust and ash. Balasundaram was a beautiful child. Darshini, a beautiful offering. Tyagarajan was one who sacrificed himself for others. Yogendran was the one who chose to serve. And Chellaya, Kumada, Kunjithambi, darling boy. Manoharan, Rasamohan, Tilageswari were the names of the beloved, the cherished ones, the burning invocations of life. So I'll go back to the poems that you've got actually, and I'm sorry for confusing you. So within my book, I've got a section that deals with migration, the different types of migration that my family have undergone, and who gets to migrate, and why are some migrations more valid than others. So I've got some poems about European colonial encounters and how they're lauded and celebrated and remembered, whereas the migrations of people from the east to the west are not treated with the same respect. So I'll start with the poem Three Friends Set Out One Day. That's it. Three friends set out one day. The one going south arrived first, having crossed imaginary borders made real by checkpoints and gun turrets. The one who went east got lost in a forest where she was rescued by an ambush of passing tigers. Not long after, she was photographed by trophy hunters, having died making their wishes come true. The one who journeyed west didn't arrive until the days turned into months, and months into seasons. In a land of snow and ice, her face grew dark, losing the light she had borrowed from the moon back home. So I was caught up in the civil war in Sri Lanka, and I fled to the UK as a refugee. I was only a child at this point, and when I arrived here, I was mute for 6 months. I wouldn't speak. And when I spoke again, I refused to speak Tamil, and I haven't spoken it since. In her keynote lecture yesterday, Professor Srikanth spoke of the silences of displacement and how language, especially in children, stutters and struggles to cope with displacement. And this next poem, New Words, New Clothes, is how I began to speak again. New words, new clothes. I discarded the words first, and then for a while mute silence. I watched and learnt like a minor bird. R became A, E became E. I changed to a short, sharp I. After a while, through whispers and croaks, new words emerged, in the borrowed tongue of a borrowed land. Tentative, tiny, and uncomplicated, brand new, pain-free little words. Their strange scrolls flowed around me. F was once a little fish, Z was once a piece of zinc, X was once a great King Xerxes. For the first time I formed an F, wrote a Z, sounded an X. In the borrowed tongue of a borrowed land, I dressed myself in them. I abandoned 2 millennia of poetry, mythology, and history. No Pallavan or Cholan could claim sovereignty over my mouth, my tongue, my mind. In the borrowed land, in the borrowed tongue of borrowed land, in single, stuttering, borrowed syllables, I began to talk again, and the new words began to flow. This next poem, the Armada Children's Library, is about cultural displacement, I suppose, a self-imposed one, or one that was imposed on me by my mother when I was still living in Sri Lanka. I think Ambli Mama is still going strong in India, but it was my favorite children's journal when I was growing up, and I had a bookcase full of them in Tamil, and I loved them.
Excuse me, ma'am. The mic
Yeah.
is making noises. Can you just
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. I had my paper on top of the mic.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, so I lost all my Ambli Mama because my mother threw them all away, and she replaced them with books in English. And they were these Armada Children's Library, and on the spine of them, their motto was their ensign was this galleon in full sail, which just speaks of colonialism in such a way. But because I was desperate, I always read. She knew that if she got rid of my Tamil books, I would have to read the English books, and that's what happened. So this is my protest against what she did. The Armada Children's Library. That was the day I returned from school to find my bookshelves empty. All copies of my precious Umblimama had disappeared. Pages filled with kings and their courts, the wisdom of swamis, of naughty devas chasing apsaras around celestial forests. Illustrations inviting me to take flight on Saraswati swan, or float down from the Himalayas on Parvati's lotus, all gone. And in their place, a pile of books in English. Enid Blyton's 8 O'Clock Tales, The Secret Seven, Mr. Meddle's Muddles. Strangers in a Ferengi lexicon, a galleon in full sail on their spine. The next poem, I hope it's going to be big enough, but in 2016, the UK Parliament voted on whether to allow 480 unaccompanied child refugees to enter the UK. It was called the Dubs Amendment because it was put forward by this man called Alf Dubs, who had been, could you just make it smaller, actually? The way you had it before was perfect. That's perfect. He had been a child refugee himself during the Second World War, and he wanted to do something for the children who were stuck in camps in Europe. Unfortunately, our parliament thought that 480 children was far too much for this country to cope with, and so they rejected the bill. And I was so incensed by just the callous cruelty that I wrote this poem, and the border on top and the word no is made up of all the names of every single member of parliament who voted against this bill. The shape of this poem as a boat, I mean, this was written in 2016. Now, if you say small boats in this country, it's achieved a whole new meaning of threat and cruelty. But at the time I wrote this poem, those two words, small boats, hadn't achieved the sort of the vitriol that they embody now. I use the shape of a boat because the UK is an island and you have to come across water whichever direction you approach it. No, they said, as mobilized children endure alone on Europe's dung heaps. They have hung up their toys, their drums, and their harps. They have nothing left to sing in this new land. Meanwhile, faith, hope, and charity lie chained and debased on Albion's shore. My family have always crisscrossed between India and Sri Lanka, crossing the Pork Strait frequently. And my mother was an Indian Tamil and my father a Ceylon Tamil. But my mother's mother was actually a Dutch burgher from Sri Lanka, although my mother fully identified as Indian. And I fully identify as a Tamil from Sri Lanka. So our identities are fluid. And this poem is about my family crisscrossing the Pork Straits, crossing the water. My mother made me the keeper of her stories, of love and loss and a family in the making, of how her grandmother had jumped from a moving train from Colombo to Jaffna to return to the man she was determined to marry, of how in time her daughter, my grandmother, chose a man from across the waters who unknotted his punul to marry her, a Christian, of how when my mother left India to join my father waiting at the altar, among her goodbyes was one that was to be final. The news of her father's death, the man she measured all men against, reached my father by telephone while she waited to cross the waters, and he kept it from her. A silence which wreathed his wedding vows, curling around the jasmine in her bouquet and in her hair. It was 1964. The Ceylonese government was in a frenzy, expelling Indian Tamils from the island. A second visa would prove impossible, my father judged, and sealed his lips tight. From such beginnings, marriages are made. So I'm just going to read the next poem, My Grandfather's House, and I'll end with this one. I don't think I'll ever return to Jaffna. And I think I'm one of the eternally misplaced as opposed to displaced. But someone sent me photos and a video of my grandfather's house decades after we'd abandoned it. And it was decrepit now and falling to ruin. And it was a record of what I had lost and my family had lost and what we'll never claim back. So I'll end with this. My grandfather's house. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, green and sticky, staining the walls and the floor with shades of the sea. They climb, tracing intricate patterns around browned squares where pictures used to hang. The roof has fallen in. Water stagnates on a cushioned floor as disturbed bats circle, drawing the night in. The rooms are empty of all that was him. The doors have been locked, warped and unwilling to open onto a tomorrow which does not contain him. It is 6 o'clock, and the mosquitoes gather noisily in rooms that once smelt of sweet margosa leaves. They are the music makers, the sum total of our dreams, the inheritors of rooms that reek and sweat in angry dismay. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, and raindrops sing a lament on deserted floors. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Yousif now.
Can you hear me, Shash?
I can hear you, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I can't hear myself. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a huge honor to be reading alongside Anthony and Shash. And I would like to thank Sarisha, Elena, and also Iman for inviting us. I'm going to read from my book, Eating the Archive. And I'm going to start with Time is a Swelling. And two acronyms are going to feature. UN, United Nations, of course, you know that. and UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. The past, out of all times, is what can be seen in eyes long gone. To see the past as a happening in its shade, my mother would carefully sift our UN gifted grains, the dry for us and the hovering bits for birds that never wear. What we ate was what she planted in secret under her pillow, remains of nothing in the shape of distant prayers. I was not alone. My mother, with a cane and poor eyesight, was to my right, nothing to our left. Now I hold her by the hand, like a drifting sound, heart to heart, throat to throat, to walk together. Bodies hung in thin air, the sweat of old age and time, suspended returns to the eyes that once saw. You say to the clock hung adjacent to all religious things in the room, my time is a swelling, my mother's yeast for the aged bread, left aside as a proof for time. Nothingness, hide not in imagination, nor ascend the psalms of night. What is left for you and me is the suspicion in suspicion. When the sky is just a crow, with air raids as infinite as their ruins, the body's task is to ponder its body. Here, in this place, people ascend to normality on crutches. A body alone feasts on the body. I shall imagine my tongue drowning in languages that are not mine, so as to speak in water. Seeing is the thing's substitute. What is seeing is the thing for its only time. To pretend not to see what is amassing in your hands, what you carry, a heart barely attached to your body, to pretend all is well for once, while they prod you in the back to remind you that it is time to look. I ask a question for me, what it is in writing that has no such thing as a present, but is written, solely written, for a future subject to many pasts. They would normally write their names in graphite, so they would rub them out and write them again as names for suspected names. I begged her to take me with her. Then I could see what she could do to her eyes in wakes, tears in the aftermath of tears, her veil slowly unraveling, two loose ends caressing my grandmother's dead face. Tears are gifts to the blind. The bird that lost its way into the camp was chased by screaming children until it was lost again. The same bird was not announced dead. For it to become permissible to eat, it is to be slain in the future. In poetry, the wound is continuously postponed. And I'm going to read a poem, in fact, that is dedicated to Anthony, titled Communion. And it touches on hosting, it touches also on touching and eating. We grow nothing, only the sky, lentils, because of what they are, what will be of them at the Last Supper, what we call food so as to remember our bodies fleetingly, what takes time while giving time, abundant times for us to be hosted by air while straying in different directions to distant fates. Those lentils are not sifted, they are pure and impure, split and whole. With air and dust we throw them somewhere, a chosen somewhere, a premeditated somewhere, and wait for them to grow as we grow. Lentils for the mouths that wear the ultimate gift. This is in no way an unconditional gift or one given to us in our own hands, but to say that the hands that delivered them to us look too big, healthy hands, hands from a non-camp, hands that can write names, transliterated names, without hesitation, hands that can write imitations of misery with a scrupulous detail, without any fear of going hungry, without any fear of being stuck off the UN register, unlike our hands, the Quran's lentils, those that feature in the body book, in the holy books, in our shared mouth, to steal from the bird's beak, dreams my mother. The birds that never live in the camp, but hover over us in season, the watery lentils, the inexhaustible treasures of the poor, the drowned lentils, the floating lentils in collective imaginations, the often talked about of food, the overwritten of bearings. Why lentils, Anthony? To eat texturally, to eat the archive, to eat that which cannot be eaten, to eat the deluge of tears, long confused with salt, to eat the exodus in us as companions, to eat the dreams that could have been truer, to eat them in the presence of a tongue blocking routes, places, and times, to eat them in order to witness the edible as a witness to us. My mother, who was too young to count and too young for her younger siblings to be left in her care, helplessly bore witness to one of them swallowing uncooked grains and dying. The parents were plowing somebody else's fields and scattering their seeds. My mother still dreams benignly of full stomachs, in her words, full but not too full like our vowels, never bloated. To this day, she recalls in fragments illicit memories of illicit places, like the parting in my sister's hair is my mother's. What before our eye is one time, what in our eyes is another. To say both sides are remainders of something, and the intended wholeness is a mere scrap for what will touch the cooked and later snap. To make them redder, my mother cooks the lentils with our blood. And if you ask what it is that she does to the pot, I would rather not tell you, but will whisper it when we next meet. I will remind you, before food is devoured, the bubbling away of something that returns in some shape or form as something more or less than the original. The crying there is no point to stop, the ending of what is ours in full, as though to say, fuck this world for what it will be. Fuck it, the leftover of the generous. Hands deeply immersed in the extras, we agree. Eating is not a swallowing, but touching upon the touched, rendering the moon as fleshy as possible in friendship and in text. With your eyes still catching the sight, you stare in all directions. None is fixed, you say, none is singular. You stir in your absences, and stir in the hope of that created by you, what buds and eventually snaps, what buds again. The season is the season, secrets held in scaled scales for days past. And I read, if I've got a bit of time, just a short poem. My father passed away almost 4 years ago. In fact, next month it will be 4 years. And he's buried in the 4th cemetery in the camp. So the refugee camps in Lebanon mainly grow vertically. So these cemeteries are, or they become, integral parts of the camp. So when you walk past the cemetery. When you return, you go through the cemetery. The body, I hold it in my right, the blameless revelation beneath the skin. The notebook he once scribbled in the past poems for a torn time, page after page, the signed that was his rhymes, incomplete, amassed for the ill heart. I remember him pouring water on us to grow like distant trees, the glasses fogging up until there was no sight, the scrubbed bodies cast aside, and the ones waiting in the background, until came the time, men and women in separate lines, muttering words, the sons in the yard, washing the dead father. And I'll read, if I still have time, just a couple of poems from writing the camp. Do I have 5 minutes, or I'll
Yes, yes. You may please go ahead.
okay, thank you. The bomb shelter, and of course, in line of what's going on in Gaza and at Skits, the bomb shelter was not just a structure, but a structure for us to resort to and to know well, so we can at least hide and survive, of course, the air raids. Um, and some of these bomb shelters, in fact, constitute the very foundations of some of the UNRWA schools, of the UN schools. So they weren't able to get rid of them. So they used them as actual foundations for the new schools. The precarious is the non-existent. There, in the much deliberated existence, will always be a missing limb. Who stayed behind to count the void that is, a shelter to come, and a camp that is? In the canon of dust, the camp deprived of its shadow is a shelter. Only dust departs and remains at once. When they built it, they carved its past out of God's shoulder. In the consequence of time, the shoulder shall return to God a severed time. My son, anger not a stray bullet, remain in a place that was. By shadowing its coming, the camp mimics the future. The string my father used to pull his tooth out as the bombs were falling snapped in half. Two almost equal strings suspended in total darkness, awaiting new blood. Declare it, even if God is certain of that which long past. In good time, time cuts the throat of time. A tomb for the hesitant, a wreath for men and metals, no clouds for the face, water for the tomb and the house plants. In my naked eye, I saw my sister running away from a bomb, stark naked, save her eyes. When we left the bomb shelter, our dusty faces stayed behind. Inside is where we swapped faces in haste. It's a still war, so no remembering to be remembered behind those walls. But the nests for the hovering metal, outside, time is tomorrow. Or could it not be that which was not? It's a still war according to their pulses. On their lips, God recites the eye, the pierced eye, eyes to the extent of not seeing the border as the dual. Outside a place, the indifference to all beyond dying, the indifference to the indifferent death, to the binding in time. There is some time in waiting, the pail tentatively suspended from the handle, a dry well in the vicinity, feigning sound. In the bomb shelter, I wet myself so I would mark my spot. The wailing inside never ended, to the extent of our dialect becoming wailing. To repel the evil isle, my mother would only count us under her breath. I cannot remember it all. What I can remember for certain is memory twisting our neighbor's neck. The imminent never arrives, a contract between time and another time it is. To make carrying the gun easier, the young fighter dressed his gun's arms with his mother's old socks. Inside the shelter, no one ever asks about the time. Time is the time of our excrements parted by unannounced ceasefires. When the bullet punctured her lung, she was squatting in the name of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Yousif M, Qasmiyeh, Shash Trevett, and Anthony Vahni Capildeo. These readings were so moving, and thank you for willing to share such a very intimate part of your lives with us. We shall move to the next part of the session. I invite Dr. Saradindu Bhattacharya to convey his general remarks and lead the discussion and Q&A for.
Thank you so much, Joseph, Anthony, and Shash, for reading out your poetry to us. It was really a privilege and a pleasure to hear you read out poetry. Some of us had the privilege of actually reading it a little in advance, but to hear you read those ones out was really remarkable. I especially liked how, in all of your poetry, there was a certain kind of uh, engagement with the idea of displacement itself through ordinary objects or ordinary experiences, and even language, which is hardly surprising given that you're poets. So that was wonderful to see it at work. I leave this open to questions now, if there are any questions from the audience. Or any remarks, general observations from people.
Hello. Thank you to all the poets. Those were really moving words. Um, it's not a question per se what I had in mind, but it's more like a I'm thinking aloud kind of a thing. I was thinking about how the first two poets, Anthony and Sash, you talked about. Both of you talked about. I think for me, what really stood out was the feeling of the idea of being moved from a very personal standpoint, like Sash talking about home, and then Anthony, I think, bring it even more further within the self. So, and I mean, I have to go through. I mean, some of the phrases that I really liked. I mean, especially Anthony's longish prose poems, where the idea of this, room being twisted and represented through wobbly lines, and then um, as and in juxtaposition to how Sash talks about the same kind of feeling in a more with a more definite address, such as a nationality or a community. So I was just thinking, how when you write these kind of very intimate experiences of displacement within the personal and through an identity of belonging to a nation or a community, how do you um, you know frame them out? Like, is it difficult in a certain way? Because, for example, we often don't, because we are, I think, all of us are people with different selves at every point of time, and to also to identify with the idea of displacement as a uniform idea and a constant is also must be puzzling at times, because you feel different things about this idea of being moved away from your place. So just a general thought.
You go first, Anthony.
I have the privilege of age before beauty. Yeah, I've been thinking quite a lot. So thank you very much for thinking aloud. And I very much appreciate as well the culture where there's genuine thinking aloud, because I can hear the thinking in the process of formation. And this is completely different from the sort of, this is a comment, not a question, which you sometimes hear at conferences. In the UK, very commonly, it will be somebody who has refused to be listening, and they have spent the whole time of the person speaking preparing the thing that they want to say. And this is actually the opposite. You have done a very beautiful exposition and exposure of the process of thought and response. So first of all, thank you for doing that, and to the conference organizers for fostering the environment where that happens. I've been thinking about this word, the displacement, and there are, well, three things I will say, because I always think of too many things at once. And one, before we began the reading, and I was thinking of the theme of the conference, and I was thinking about the other words in English, like replacement, how there is a right-wing conspiracy theory of the replacement of the so-called white race, which is creating fear among people that is being mobilized as a justification for closing borders and for massacres and genocide. So the replacement, as if somebody had been in place. And then also people talk about emplacement, And whenever somebody pronounces something in French, they are perhaps going to be a little bit detached from reality if they are speaking in English. And so the emplacement is often not really used in a way that is responsive to a lived experience or a political analysis of an environment. Often is used too aesthetically, I think. But I was thinking about what if the opposite of displacement is in placement, and what if the whole business of feeling displaced is because in the eye of some dominant culture or the air of some dominant culture, we are not keeping to our places, we are not in place. The long prose poem I read from my book Measures of Expatriation, that book actually came from my experience of losing confidence, because when I grew up in Trinidad, which obviously is in the global south, I had a lot of confidence that I could express myself, and people would engage in some way. They would hear, and then they would begin that process like we have just had of thinking aloud. Whereas in the UK, I was very often asked the question, well, why do you want to know that? Or why would you say that? Or that's sort of absolute returning to a base of zero. And I realized that to think as I did, to express as I did as a poet, was not to be in my place. And so one of the things I've been trying to think about is what Sandeep Parmar has theorized as lyric violence, and also the nomadic subject, not in the strict sense of nomadic, but whether or not wandering, going from place to place in some way, is always part of the activity of the poetic imagination. And then the feeling of displacement is in some ways an illusion, which is fostered by dominant cultures wanting to impose their concept at some very profound level, even before language, of what is and is not in place, what is possible to be placed in words. And then whether in point of fact there is something else to do with place. I think which Yousif you're starting to get at in that marking of time through the body, when sky and sea don't reflect each other, but the bombs and the ruined landscape reflect each other, then what kind of placement, what placedness is the body becoming an imaginative marker of the imagining body, not the homed body? So that is me thinking aloud as well. It's not really a satisfactory answer. Anyone else? Yousif, Shash?
Shash, I think.
Well, there's a reason why I asked Anthony to go first, because she just, she just takes us all into wonderful directions. But thank you, yes, for that wonderful question. I think if I'm right in following your thought, it's about the personal, but also becoming a sort of a national sort of identity sort of thing. I think my experiences coming to this country was that there is an erasure of me as a person, because when people look at me, they don't see me. They see a marker of a place I've left. And I think that's so we sort of learn very quickly to embody the the characteristics of the place we have left behind, because we can't exist in any other way in the West. In people who don't share our experiences, we don't exist in any other sort of frame of reference. And so for me to sit here and write about, I often say, and this is very cheekily, the sort of white poet's privilege of writing about knitting scarves and drinking cups of tea. I sort of feel as if I don't have that, and I don't want to have that, because I have got to I don't know, it's this symbiotic thing of I reflect back what people have imposed on me when they look at me. So I have to reflect back what it means to be a Tamil who has lost their land. That's which is also a privilege, because I can speak and there are so many people who don't have that privilege of speaking back in Sri Lanka. So it's also a responsibility, but it's also, I feel caged by perceptions of me that aren't quite true, if you know what I mean. Sorry, Yousif.
Thank you. It's I I think about, in fact, about the word or the equivalent of the word home in Arabic, bait, which in classical Arabic has three meanings. It's in fact the tomb and the home where we live, the dwelling, but also a verse in a poem. And the three are premised in fact, on some kind of demarcation. And we're talking about the length, but we're talking about permanence, but we're talking about movement at the same time. So, and this, of course, brings us to the refugee camp. So, how am I supposed to view a refugee camp when it's meant socioeconomically, structurally, architecturally to be viewed as a transient, as just a base, a period, some kind of suspended chronology until people are able to return to their countries? I was born in a camp. My family were forced out of Palestine. So when I talk about my displacement, it's the displacement that comes, in fact, from within the home, from within the family. And it's about how displacement is articulated in our mainly attempts at validating ourselves historically and validating our very existence in these places. And now, of course, there are some sociologists and anthropologists who refer to these camps as, or they describe them as, temporary impermanence. And I'm not a huge fan of such things. I think that the lived experience within the camp is really is valid, and this has nothing to do with the trauma and suffering. Perhaps pain is what we talk about, but not just the corporeal. Here I'm talking about the historical pain, the existential pain, because we are in these incarcerated spaces. People can't live freely. People, in fact, can't venture beyond the borders of such camps. They can't build, they can't fix things. And when, of course, a cemetery is full, they simply encroach on the let's say the doorsteps of people, and they create another cemetery. So how the dead, in a sense, are encroaching on the living and swallowing gradually, of course, part of our living presence. So this is how I see. I haven't been to Palestine because I'm not allowed to go there. But I also hear about the place where my family, of course, not only lived and enjoyed their childhood, but also I remember how it's about this kind of maybe poetic solidarity with history. So we have to understand that it's not about, of course, not asking your parents about the specifics of their stories. But in fact, the moment you start to understand what's happened to them, you come to terms with maybe this kind of solidarity that is based on on the poetics of movement. And of course, the violence of movement, because that was forced movement. They were fleeing, and they were fleeing. And my mother, for instance, was born en route during the 1948 exodus. And even her name was deferred. So the naming of my mother was deferred because my grandparents didn't believe that she's going to make the journey as a newborn. So she was named only when they settled in a temporary first place, and then when they moved to the camp. So displacement is not just the lived experience, but it's also how it overlaps with other, in fact, the human beings, with how these histories, whether it's Anthony's or Shash's histories, and how these histories are in correspondence with one another. And this correspondence itself is the antithesis of displacement, because at least we're moving. At least there is this mobility in such conversations, and in how we also want to write about such thematics. And Shash, you mentioned knitting, and you mentioned tea, and I was asked once a question about when am I going to remove the camp or to scoop it out of the text, and that was asked by a translator. And I don't think that this very same translator would have asked, let's say, a white writer if he would be willing to perhaps to remove a very specific village or town or a structure, or let's say I don't know, field, but also even our, let's call them maybe tenets of memories, are under suspicion and are questioned incessantly. And I hope that what I've said makes a bit of sense. This
Very, very much so. And also, I realize I haven't given an autobiography of my individual displacement, but partly because I have been thinking quite a lot about what it even means to speak as an individual. Last night, I was reading some of the material of the hunger strikes in Palestine, and how there has been a movement from the collective hunger strike to the individual hunger strike, and that is not to be viewed as an atomization or individualization or any sort of transition, but as in solidarity with the past collective and anticipation of the future collective. So this idea that there's such a thing as the collective singular, which is in fact something that is a matter of freedom, not a matter of not a matter of dilution.
absolutely.
Sorry, but we should maybe ask, somebody else from those present has something else to say, perhaps.
Thank you so much, Anthony, Yousif, and Shash, for sharing your thoughts on how you write poetry as well, not just for reading out the poems that you shared with us. Since we have more sessions lined up, I think if there are no more questions, perhaps we can wind this up. On behalf of the Department of English, on behalf of the conveners, I thank all three poets for taking their time out despite the time difference and reading out their poetry to us. Thank you so much, all of you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Anthony and Yousif. See you soon.
Thank you. Lovely to see
everyone.
you. Lovely to see you,
Really
Anthony.
lovely to
Lovely
see
to see
you.
you, Shash.
And I will
And
pop
Anthony,
into the
hope to
pub.
see you soon.
Yes.
Oh yes, I have to be in touch about that.
Yes, and
Yes,
Shash,
but
I'll see you
I'm
in
thousands of
June.
miles away from everybody right now.
Looking forward to that. Are you spending the night, or are you returning home on the
I'm
same?
I'm spending the night on the 28th
Okay.
because Vivian's giving the Poetry Society lecture on the 28th. So I'm going to go to that
Okay.
and then spend the night 28th and then leave on the 29th.
Okay.
Spending the night where? Where are you?
Ledbury. We're both reading
Ledbury.
together.
Oh, good heavens, be very careful. There's a terrible lady there who has dogs. Sorry, I will tell you that story one day, but I was put up in her house and Rishi Dastida had helped me escape on an early train. But
Do you know, Shash, do you know the name of the person who's hosting you?
No, because I haven't actually got back in touch as yet to say.
okay, does the person live on Bowling Green Road? Because then
Just to
you
try to
stay
avoid
there.
what Anthony is saying.
Yeah, but if the person lives on a place called Bowling Green Road, there'll be no curtains in the bathroom, and you will have to walk past a Rottweiler that is not leashed and hasn't been
Oh
introduced to you,
gosh.
and they will
Oh,
shout
gosh.
"fuck off" if you ring the doorbell. So also they'll get really angry if you don't come and have breakfast with them and tell them about poetry when they're in the garden, even if you have a workshop to give.
Oh
So
no!
like if it's the people at Bowling Green Road, don't stay there.
Yeah. I've heard, in fact, yeah. The question of hospitality is a quite.
I might stay in a hotel.
Well, literally, a tent is better. They have tents in a field that sound safer.
So, Shash, why don't you find a big tent for us?
We'd have a party.
Yes, exactly. 2 bottles of wine and we're done.
I'm looking forward to that.
And then, of course, Anthony would join us.
Yes, and please give my love to Vidyan.
I will do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that's very strange for me is hearing the Sanskrit in the names, because obviously the names you're reading out, many of them are transparent to me, because they're in fact Sanskrit rather than Tamil roots, and then I feel an immediate huge amount of colonizer guilt, because basically that is a colonial trace.
Well, the thing is, with like the name Ashokan, if I pronounce it the Tamil way, I should pronounce it Asokan, because the sh doesn't. It does exist now because the language has changed.
Yes.
But when I was being taught Tamil at school, the sh sound doesn't. So my name is Sasikala because the sh doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And my mother Sanskritized it because she brought in the sh. So
this is really interesting because I mean I have family of technically mixed heritage because I have a few Muslim as well as Hindu ancestors. And one of the ways that some people in my family were exotic is they would have fa instead of pa, instead of ja. You know, these non-existent letters, or
yes,
the exoticism of the Urdu Arabic sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, I suppose we should go really.